Government is rolling out spending cuts.
Yes, indeed. The French government is trying to show that it's serious about getting a handle of its budget deficit. And the Prime Minister Manuel Valls has detailed a plan to cut 21 billion euros from things like pensions, social care and also healthcare. It's part and parcel of an effort to cut the French deficit by 50 billion euros by 2017. Carl Brown has more details.
France's new Prime Minister Manuel Valls lost little time, announcing a host of reforms moments after emerging from a crucial cabinet meeting. The aim? To show that major reforms are now on track.
We have to restore the fabric of our economy and regain the ability to better compete, develop the country's economic activity and hire workers again. That's not to say that we will call into question our social model, our social rules or the minimum wage.
Valls reiterated the socialist government's pledge to cut public spending by 50 billion euros between 2015 and 2017. To make savings, the government will cut staffing outside of education and justice and security and freeze some social benefits until October 2015. The lowest pensions and welfare payments will escape the measure. A civil servant pay freeze already in place will remain until next year. The cuts are aimed at allowing France to bring in its budget deficit to within 3% of its GDP, to comply with its obligations to the European Union. Although the Prime Minister made a fresh pledge to honor France's commitment, there are warnings that more measures are necessary.
Now, global stock markets have been getting a boost after China's latest growth figures. The world's second biggest economy grew by 7.4% between January and March. That's in comparison to the same period last year. The Chinese government is aiming for a growth rate of 7.5% for the year as a whole, and the figure from the first quarter is below that. It's also the weakest reading since 2012, following a gradual slowdown in recent quarters. Still, though, economists had been expecting a slightly weaker reading than they got, and a 7.4% growth rate is still seen as a sign that the Chinese economy is holding up pretty well. Let's take a closer look then at how stock markets digested that news. In Europe, those China figures helped markets to end above the flat line with an almost 1.6% boost there for the DAX in Frankfurt. Investors, they are watching events in Ukraine, of course, but those events were seen to be put to one side during Wednesday's session. In the United States, the indices also closed above the flat line. The S&P 500 up just over 1% there. That China data boosted shares stateside as well, as comments from Fed Chair Janet Yellen also seem to be bringing a little bit of a spring to investor steps. If we take a closer look at those comments from Janet Yellen, she's reaffirmed that the US central bank is committed to low interest rates for some time still. Speaking in New York earlier, Yellen said the jobs market is improving in the United States, but still needs help from the Fed. And she said the US central bank would look at a range of indicators before hiking those interest rates.
The purpose of my remarks today is to emphasize that there can be a lot of twists and turns. We need to be alert to what is happening in the economy and to respond to what we see happening, and not a fixed idea that we perhaps held at some earlier time about what will come to pass.
OK, let's talk you through a few other stories that we've been watching for you. Legal costs pushed Bank of America into a $276 million loss in the first quarter. The banking giant was dragged down by legal expenses to the tune of $6 billion. That includes a payment to the US government to settle allegations the bank missold mortgage-backed securities before the financial crisis. Shares in Bank of America closed down on Wall Street as a result. And here's a story to keep an eye on during trading on Thursday. Google has reported lower than expected profits for the first quarter. Overall, Google made $3.45 billion between January and March. That's higher than last year, but still lower than investors and analysts had expected. And in after-hours trading, we've seen Google shares coming down as a result. Here in Europe, Starbucks is moving its regional headquarters from the Netherlands to London, and the American coffee chain says it will be paying more tax in the UK as a result. It follows harsh criticism that Starbucks wasn't paying enough British tax through advanced tax planning. And finally, as far as PR stunts go, this is a high-flying one. Ford has unveiled a spruced-up version of the Mustang on the 86th floor of the Empire State Building in New York. It's the first overhaul of the convertible since 2005. The unveiling took place as the global car industry gathers in New York for the annual auto show in the city. You may be wondering how you get a car to the 86th floor. Well, apparently you chop it up to bring it up in lifts, and then you reassemble it right there on the 86th floor. There you go, Claire. Just a little tip for you in case you were wondering how that all happened.
A little bit disappointed by that, Marcus. I thought they might have dropped it off a helicopter or something a little more
Not
colourful.
as exciting. I still think it's pretty impressive, though, to chop up a Mustang and then just bring it all together.
Marcus Carlton, thank you very much for that roundup of all the business news. And now it's time for Media Watch here on France 24. I'm joined in studio by James Creedon.